Hi, my name is Anthony Turner. Today my guest is Joss Evans, who's the CEO of Innovic. Innovic is an organisation that specialises in helping business owners in the commercialisation of their idea space, and I thought it might be worthwhile to have Joss come along and have a chat about what commercialisation means, because it's becoming a very big topic. Joss, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
As I said before, commercialisation and innovation is sort of the topic or flavour of the month almost. And, again, yeah. For the benefit of our listeners and viewers and everything else, what does actually commercialisation and innovation mean? What are the differences in those spaces?
Well, I suppose first of all we could start with a definition of innovation. The definition I use is one that one of our directors coined, and it's basically change that adds value. Okay. There's no point in changing a product if it's not going to improve it in some way. So innovation really is about changing a product or service that adds value. And I think that's quite an important point to make. In terms of commercialisation really is the process of getting the idea out of your head and to market. And the idea could be for a product, a service or a technology or even a process. But it's the process of getting it out there and commercialising it, exploiting it for profit.
And there's probably some very important steps along that journey, isn't there? From the concept to actually something that's physical and actually doing well in the marketplace. Sure. What are some of the key steps that people who maybe have an idea need to be thinking about, and what are some of the steps that they've got to sort of work their way through?
Well, I guess the first thing is, rather than come up with an idea and look around for who wants it, find a need, solve a problem, see an opportunity. I think those are three important things first, because that will shape the way your idea goes. Yes. So if you solve a problem, and it's a problem hopefully that is a widespread problem, not just a problem that you have but other people have, then you may have an opportunity that you can exploit. But one of the things that people often do, first of all, is come up with the idea, look around, who wants it? Wrong way to go. Mm-hmm. The other thing not to do is to come up with an idea and immediately take out international patents, because you don't actually know in the early stages whether you've got something that's going to be commercially viable. Okay. So when you've come up with your idea, it solves a problem or there's a market need for it, the next thing to do would be to do some research. Yes. Does it already exist? And as you know from your own experience, Anthony, there's nothing new under the sun. But is your idea, your new innovation, better or offers some value to the client, to the market? Is it really going to make you any money? And if it's not going to make you any money, well, hang off a minute. Let's go back and see, can it be improved? Okay. So how would look, I've got this idea for widget X, and I think it's going to be... I've seen one of those before. Have you? Okay, yeah, probably a few of those. And my widget X, I think, is going to solve a particular problem, and I've actually identified that there's quite a group of people who it does solve a problem for. Yeah. How do I get that out in paper but also protect my idea at the same time? Because there are various stages. I can understand when you sort of actually down the trail of commercialisation, IP protection or trademark protection and things like that are needed. But in those early stages, how can I sort of protect it so as I don't sort of inadvertently give my idea away who somebody who's got some more money and resources who can actually snaffle it away from me? Well, in the early stages, you probably have to be a bit circumspect in how you talk about your idea and who you talk to about it. If you're going to talk to a manufacturer, for example, to make your widget, which might be something for the household market, you probably need to use a confidentiality agreement or a non-disclosure agreement. They're basically the same thing by a different name, because that way the person that you speak to gives an undertaking that any information you give to them about your innovation will be kept confidential. Okay. You can also, if you wanted to, put a provisional patent on your idea. Mm-hmm. But as I said, it's important to first of all check that you've got something that's going to be viable before you spend money on patents. Okay. So what are sort of the logical steps that I would go through from my idea to market? So, first of all, we would work out with you the whole commercialisation strategy. So, depending on what your product is, there are different strategies, different ways to get it to market. If you've got a widget for the household market, you need to determine, are you going to manufacture it and distribute it, or find somebody to distribute it for you, which is sort of a do-it-yourself type of thing. You do all the work, you do the tooling up, you have to get dies made, or the process of getting it designed, etc. Or are you going to license it? Or is there a joint venture? If you're going to manufacture, you will need to have probably a patent of some kind in place, and that might be an innovation patent, it might be a regular patent, a standard patent, or it might be a registered design. You may also look at trademarks, trademarking your brand further down the track. If you're going to license it to somebody, you will need robust IP, because what you do then is you assign the rights to your intellectual property in exchange for royalty payments.
Okay.
And that could be an upfront payment or upfront and ongoing. Usually it's not upfront, it's usually licensing will give you a return, a royalty on units sold over a year, typically.
Yeah.
But you need robust IP, because when you go to a third party to license it, and let's say you've got a product that Black & Decker might be interested in, for example, they will have their patent attorneys look at the product and look at the patent and say, is this robust enough for us to write a licensing agreement?
Okay, yes.
And if it is, then the next stage is negotiation of the licensing agreement. And we help right through the process with that.
Okay.
And with the licensing agreement, you put in performance clauses, you put in how the royalties will accrue, what happens if the product evolves into something else, who owns the intellectual property, and also a geographic location. What are the terms of the licensing agreement? Is it just in Victoria? Is it the whole of Australia? Is it the world?
Okay.
So there are things more complicated than that, but just basically you look at the terms of a licensing agreement. All being well, you sign up, and then usually you get a licensing royalty per unit produced after a year, usually.
Okay.
And as you know, in the first year, ramp up takes a while. So it will be a low return for you in the first year, but in years 2 and 3, you'd expect it to increase.
Okay, cool. So that's in the sort of taking the other side of it. So I've got an idea. That's a process of how I would get it into market using those sort of structures.
Yeah.
Is there a process also that I need to be thinking about in terms of how I actually develop my idea and go through steps of exploration, research and things like that is different to this commercialisation side of it?
Well, it's probably all part of the spectrum, really.
Yes.
But depending on what exactly you've got. So, for example, it may be a new type of cake or a new type of biscuit that you might have come up with. I mean, there's lots of innovation in the food area.
Yes.
Might be food packaging, for example.
Okay.
But let's say if it was a food product, you may have to do some testing of it.
Right.
So you've got let's say you come to Innovic, you've got a new idea for a new type of food product that you're going to do, something a cross between a cronut and something else, the current trend in cupcakes, donuts and combinations thereof. You want to get the recipe finalised, so there'll be tasting and testing on the recipe. You'd be looking at shelf life. You'd be looking at how you produce it, how you package it, who you're going to sell it to. There's a whole lot of things in the process. And with something like a recipe, it's a case of how you're going to protect it. Can you protect it? It may just be a trademark and a brand.
Okay.
So you may go for some really whiz-bang branding, and your new type of cake may evolve into other add-on products.
Okay, it's very interesting, and I guess there are many different things and different elements of this depending on the type of product and service that you've got. So some of the things that I'm aware of is like there are different levels of IP protection.
Sure.
So basically, maybe you could comment on sort of some of those different protections and what sort of protection they actually give. I often hear people say that trademarks and patents and copyright and those sort of things. What do they actually mean, and how do they protect me or our listener and viewer in terms of the stuff that they're actually developing?
Well, I'm not an IP patent attorney, of course, but this is broad brush stuff that I'm giving here for the sort of general market.
They can pay for the other advice.
They can pay for the other advice, yes, but generally.
Yeah.
So if you're starting out, usually with the patenting process, to lodge a patent, your innovation has to be new and inventive, and it has to be not an obvious step.
Okay.
So it isn't something that anybody could have said, yeah, I could have done that. That's dead easy. It's got to be new. It's got to be inventive. And in fact,
like the wine cask bladder was an inventive way of doing storing wine. Yeah.
Yes. So it's got to be new and inventive. You normally go through a two-step process. You lodge a provisional application, which you can do yourself online.
Yes.
But, buyer beware here. You need to know what you're doing, because your whole business may revolve around the robustness of your patent.
Okay.
But there are good examples on IP Australia's website.
Okay.
And as you know, IP Australia is the patent office in Australia. So provisional patent might be a starting point. After 12 months, you then get the opportunity to file for your standard patent, which is then going to be examined. You pay another fee for that. And once you ask for it to be examined, it is set in concrete. You can't change it. Okay. But in the 12 months of your provisional patent, you can tweak it, fine-tune it. You can't radically alter it, but you can tweak it. Okay. So that 12 months in the provisional patent gives you time to experiment. So let's say your gadget, the home handyman gadget, you find out when you go to a designer, and we certainly help people find designers and help with the design, you find out, well, this is a bit too complicated. If we go with the design that you originally thought of, there's going to be so many moving parts, it's going to be too expensive.
Okay.
So a designer will say, okay, let's streamline it, ready for manufacture. Strip away all those parts you don't need, perhaps add some other features that you might not have thought of to the design to enhance it, and make it easier to manufacture. Yep. So that sort of thing you would put in your provisional patent.
Yes.
And when you file your standard patent, all of that is then set in concrete. You ask for it to be examined. The examination process can take 2 years or more. And once it's examined, and you then get the chance to file overseas. It can be an expensive process. And with a patent, you keep it going for 20 years, providing you keep paying the renewal fees.
Okay.
With the innovation patent, that's a little bit different. It's for a lower level of innovation. So it doesn't have to be totally new and inventive. It can be innovative without being totally extraordinary, let's say. But that doesn't mean to say it's not got some legs to it. It can be commercially viable. But the innovation patent is granted automatically. It's not examined unless you ask for it to be examined. So if you're going to a licensing agreement, unless it's been examined, that isn't very robust.
Okay.
So that could affect your ability to license.
Okay, sure. So with a patent, using this particular example, if I take out a patent on my new Whizbang product, and it's all approved and I'm granted the patent here in Australia, does that give me protection overseas? Is it an international patent, or is it an Australia only? Because I know, say, for trademarks, for example, they have to be registered in all the different countries. Yeah. Well,
what people tell you is that the provisional patent gives you a priority date. So it means you've got a foot in the door in the IP pathway, if you like. Does it give you robust experience, a robust position overseas? Unless you actually patent in those overseas countries, then probably not.
Okay.
So if you actually patent in the US or the UK or France or wherever you're going to patent, that's the way to really ensure that you own the IP in those countries.
Right.
I mean, it often happens, and we've seen it over many years, people come up with the same idea. I mean, if you look at the patent database, how many different types of locks are there for cars? You know, there's different ways of doing it. Yes. There's hundreds of locks for cars. Yes. Same with software. You know, you look on the digital stuff on the patent database, there's lots of different types of software. So there's different ways of doing things. So what you need, if your patent has to be unique.
Okay.
You know, and that's the way your patent will be granted.
Okay. trademarks you mentioned earlier, and
Yeah.
we touched on. The difference between a patent and a trademark is the patent is, as you said, very much about a physical process or
Yes.
something like that is
Yeah.
unique. A trademark, in my understanding, is much more about a branding, a logo, an image, and those sorts of
Sure.
things. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Well, a trademark can also be a smell nowadays.
Okay.
It can be a sign. That's exactly right. As you've said, it can be a name, a sign, a mark. It's your brand, really. It's your image. But it can be a colour, as you know. So there's different ways to protect your business. Often we see now with the digital products we see, and as you know, everybody and their dog has an app. That's digital is hugely a huge growth area.
Mm-hmm.
Often, if you've got some app, you might be using off-the-shelf software, so that might not be protectable. How you do that then is you protect your brand, and it's a first-to-market advantage there.
Okay.
So you've got some brand like Uber, for example. You know, you've got a brand. What else have they got that they protect? A website? Well, you know, who hasn't got a website?
Yeah.
You know, it's a sort of a matching website which exists in various types of other types of enterprises. So you protect your brand. And it's about your marketing of it, that brand.
Yes. And that sort of leads into the copyright, which is the lower level again, isn't
Sure,
it?
yeah.
So, and copyright, my understanding, is more to do with the written word, and once again, it's sort of first to market gives you.
Well, it can be music as well. It's the
Okay.
creative, artistic work.
Okay.
Yes. So copyright can cover a whole lot of things. It can be music, it can be film, it can be TV production, it can be anything in that artistic area.
Yes.
One of the things for small businesses, particularly in the copyright area, especially if they're doing website promotion, is to know how they can use other people's material in their website. For example, if you're using clips of little films, for example, or you're using music in your business.
Yes.
Let's say you're a gym instructor, you've got some new type of boot camp for fat kids, for example, or overweight dogs, something innovative like that. You might be using music in your business. It's important to know how you stand legally if you are using music.
Okay.
You know, how can you use other people's music without paying royalties? You know, those things you have to check.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful of that.
Yeah, my wife and I, we've got a gift shop, and one of the things that we do is we play music in the background whilst we're there.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we've found is the APRA license,
Sure. Yeah.
which for those who don't know what it is, it's actually a license that you can get through the government, which allows you to play pre-recorded music and everything else in those sorts of environments.
Yeah.
And your license covers any of the royalties and keeps it legal.
And you find the same with gyms, for example. If you do a gym workout, you know, there's always music going on there.
Yes. Yeah.
But, you know, it's important that you get the legal position clear there and to make sure that you're not infringing on anybody's copyright.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we've sort of talked about some of the protections of IP, and you've mentioned some of the, like the agreements up front, that like the confidentiality agreements, non-circumvention, those sorts of things that go. So if you're actually getting out there to the idea, once we've actually started doing that process, from your background experience, what are some of the key things that people often miss out on doing that you would say, no, stop and do these things before you actually take another step?
Well, I suppose it's working out the best route to market.
Okay.
The best commercialisation strategy, because people think that they were going to license, you know, this is an idea that everybody wants.
Yes.
You know, a new type of app, surely everybody will want it. What they actually find out is that, you know, it's an app that you can give to Apple, but, you know, nobody's buying it.
Yep.
So you have to have a marketing strategy. Yes. And that's where a lot of small businesses fall down. They have great ideas, new designer handbags, new food trucks, new types of gadgets that the home handyman market will want, but unless people know about it, you're never going to make any sales. Okay. So you have to have a strategy to get your idea out there. Okay. And it might be a launch, for example. There may be social media, which is always part of the marketing strategy now, but you might want to come up with something a bit more creative. It might be a competition. It may be, let's say, a new type of app for children to help them read.
Yes.
So you might want children to name the app. So it might be something you run with schools,
Yes.
or you may have a new type of footwear. You might want models to try it, you know, so it might be part of Fashion Week, for example. So I think it's very important for businesses nowadays to think of innovative ways of doing things.
Okay.
There's so many people competing in the same marketplace. For example, if you run a pizza parlour,
Yes.
you know, what makes your pizza different from anybody else's?
Yeah.
Probably not a lot, but you've got to try and differentiate yourself.
Yes.
And you've really got to make your product not only good, but extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you've got to use some creative and innovative thinking to do that. And partly that's marketing, it's strategy, and it's the look and feel of your product as well. So there's an ethical thing maybe. There may be a social enterprise aspect of it.
Yes.
You may want to be supporting a particular charity or a foundation that's relevant to your organisation, that not only does good in the world, but also gives you a little bit of a different market, if you like. I mean, it's about thinking innovatively in everything you do, really.
Yeah. I think, and also one of the things that I see in our work both in the Institute and with mentoring and coaching is that oftentimes people don't really understand who their customers are, and the fact that they, even within all of the customers that may fit their group, there's only a proportion of them that are actually going to buy, and it's about putting everything around those core customers and satisfying their problems and needs rather than trying to be everything to everybody.
And that's right. And I think as well, people don't clearly define who's going to be the market, as you say, but who do you have to reach?
Yes.
For example, we know if you're selling programs for children, it's mums you have to get to.
Yeah.
You know, moms are going to be the decision maker. If you've got a new program to enhance your child's learning experience, you sell to a mom.
Yeah.
If it might be something, perhaps in another type of market, it might be leisure or outdoor activities.
Yes.
That might be something you might sell to the dad of the partnership.
Yeah.
It might be quite different. And often we find that when people come in to see us about an idea, they've got a great idea for a product and they think it's in this market, you know, with a little bit of thinking about it, we can often pivot it and say, well, hang on, that might be a market, but this market over here is huge. Yeah. This is a small market, this is a large market. Yeah. You know, so the low-hanging fruit is the large market often.
Yes.
But sometimes ideas often need to pivot a little bit, don't they?
They certainly do.
So they need, and sometimes you find, you know, when people come in with the new idea, when they have input from other people, they can see, oh, right, I didn't think of that market for this. Yeah. And sometimes when you deal with people that have got experience in this space, they can see things that the individual perhaps can't see or doesn't see immediately. Yeah. Eventually they get there.
Sure. Talking about the marketing and everything else, I mean, obviously there's a cost to marketing,
sure.
And there is a cost to development and all of those sorts of things. From your experience, what sort of dollars, and I understand this will vary from product type to product type, but let's say we had an app or something like that, which was determined as innovative, efficient, effective. What sort of dollars can people expect, or should they be thinking about putting aside to actually to commercialise their idea, rather than just sort of an idea everybody's going to jump in and give me money for it, because often they don't?
Well, that's a hard one because it really does depend what you've got.
Yep.
Some products you can license off CAD drawings. You don't need to make a prototype anymore. The days of making prototypes for some products are well and truly gone. You can do visualization of products. You can do algorithms that might test the functionality so that you can prove that your new type of drilling machine, for example, that might be used in mining, you can test the efficacy of it. You can show that it will work. You can show the benefits of this new type of drill. You don't need to make the drill. I mean, in the old days, you might have need to make it. Nowadays, you don't need to, and you can take it to mining companies, and they can get it from CAD drawings, algorithms, and independent valuations and assessments of it. With some sorts of products like software or apps, if you can do it yourself, you keep costs really low. And it can be really low key to do. It can be a couple of $1,000s. Depending on the level of complexity of it. So it can be a small amount of money, it can be a large amount of money. If you've got something in the service area, you want to do some sort of a crowdfunding platform, for example.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can get a white label crowdfunding platform for a couple of $1,000s.
Yeah.
You don't need to pay, more than that really for that. But it really depends what you've got. If you've got a new type of shoe or clothing or garment, to do a prototype of that, that can be a couple of $100s less if you can do it yourself.
Yes.
In terms of your whole life cycle of a product, your patent, for example, let's have a look at patenting costs over the life cycle, could be $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
We know a provisional patent, if you go to a patent attorney, you're looking at between $3,000 and $6,000, then you've got ongoing costs. Design and development, a designer can charge you anywhere from something very simple, like new design of a handbag, for example, could be from $500 to $5,000. A design of a household product or gardening implement, that can be from a couple of thousand to, how long is a piece of string? 10,000 plus. Depends really on the product that you've got.
Yep.
With some sorts of services, there's very little outlay. You've got a new type of food van that you want to run. Okay, you pay for the food van. You've got a new type of food that you want to deliver, or you've got a way of connecting resources with needs. It might just be a website. And websites can start at $500.
Yeah. I understand it's very diverse, but I'm really pleased that you went through a list of different types of things, because I think what it does is help people who may be listening or viewing this start thinking a little bit bigger than just their idea and the immediate stuff that they've got to do. Because if you're going to provide, patent attorneys cost money to do the work for you, and whilst they cost money, they're not necessarily an expense, because they actually save you a lot of money because they know what to do and where to go, and that's time that you as the business owner can be using very much on developing the market and the other things that are going to generate money for your business. And I guess the other thing is that how realistic do you find majority of people are in relation to what they're going to return out of their ideas?
Well, always overly optimistic.
Yep.
And you'll know that from any business plan you see, and I see hundreds of business plans. So the amount you're going to generate is very, very good. And the fact is, if it isn't, you just alter a figure, don't you?
You do.
So as people say, there's no such thing as a losing business plan. You just fix it so that it looks on paper that you're going to make money. But people's expectations are unrealistic. They always have been. But then again, you do see, like with crowdfunding sites, many examples, and many of our clients do crowdfunding, and we help them with that. You see these silly little ideas, cocktail shakers, somebody's trying to raise $5,000, and what have they raised? 1.5 million. So sometimes those things that can suddenly grab the consumer, that can go viral, take off. So sometimes you can't bring a product to market without any money. That's the reality. You need to invest time, you need to invest energy, and there are costs. And if you have no budget, do not get into this market. Really, it's very hard to be a small business person starting up without any money, because somewhere along the line, it's going to cost you. But you can keep your costs low by getting good advice early in the process. So don't go spending a lot of money needlessly. Find out if it's going to work and go through the process in a step-by-step way. So at any point in time, you can pull the plug or you can change the direction of it. So if you find licensing isn't going to work, then you might want to go into manufacture. So there's always things you can do.
One of the things, let's assume that we've actually got this widget and we've actually created it, and we found a marketplace. It's a good idea. There's a lot of demand for it and everything else. And I'm seeking funding, and you've touched on crowdfunding as being one of those options. There are many other sorts of investor type fundings, angel investors and things like that. And I know in your organisation you work with some of those.
I do.
I think one of the things that I've noticed is that the majority of people who are seeking funding don't necessarily know what the investors are looking for. They know what they want, which is money to develop their idea. Can you give some ideas about, if you're going for the sort of the angel investing or the true funding, type options, what sort of things they need to be thinking about to attract that sort of funding? Well,
of course, what we see at the moment is a real growth of the venture accelerators. Venture accelerators are primarily for people in the digital space. So this is software, hardware and apps, basically. If you've got a great idea, venture accelerators are looking for great ideas. How they basically work is they will give you seed funding, and it can be up to $50,000. You enter a venture accelerator, and they're all over the country, but mostly in capital cities. You can get seed funding, you get 3 months program, to help you get your app up and running. You normally get office space and you get pitch time.
Sure.
And you get access to perhaps Silicon Valley investors.
Okay.
So if you've got something really good in the digital space, there is money there for you. Okay. Angel investors are looking for really great original ideas, not a Me Too product, of which there are many. They're looking for something that's scalable, that's global, that has got a good team behind it, and is a good idea. It doesn't have to be, at this point in time, it doesn't have to be an extraordinary idea, but it has to have a large market, and they have to have a good team. Okay. And usually, investors don't take on a one-person team. You'd expect a team developing a digital product to be at least consisting of 3, usually at least one techie, maybe somebody with a bit of marketing or some other skill, and perhaps somebody with financial skill would be ideal. But you need to have a team that you can work with, and with angel investors, you have to work with them and they have to work with you. So you have to have a relationship with them, because you're going to be involved with them potentially for quite a long time. They have to know that you can deliver, that you're not just going to get bored with this after 6 months and say, okay, right, I'm packing my bags, I'm going to Bali.
And with the angel investors, what sort of return do they typically look for out of an
They're looking for a 10 times multiplier on their money. So angel investors will normally give you up to, say, $500,000. And it might be a consortia of investors. But as I say, they're heavily in the digital space. So if you've got a new environmental product, or you've got a household gadget or a gardening implement or something like that, that may not be as attractive to angel investors, simply because digital is faster. In 3 months they know whether you're going to make it or break it, if you like. But there are other sources of funding. So angel investors come in up to 500,000. After that, you're looking at VCs. But that's when it gets quite difficult, because everybody's chasing money. So you need to be sure of your pitch. You need to be able to answer questions. Who are my competition? And you need to be honest about it. Where's the flaws in my business plan? Because if you don't see them, the investors are going to see them. Investors are usually hard-bitten people. They're investing their own money. They've been around the traps. They're not doing this out of joy and altruism. They're trying to make a return. And they know out of every 10 investments they make, 1 will give them a return. So they've got to be sure that 1 is going to be a good one. And hopefully yours will be it. But you've got to convince somebody that yours is the one to invest in.
Sure. Just, is there much around in the government space? Because, everybody sort of looks at government for grants and things like that. And I know there are some innovation grants and some research development type grants that are available.
Well, it depends where you are in the spectrum, the commercialisation spectrum, or even in the small business area. As an early stage startup, there isn't very much, to be quite honest, because often with government grants, you need a track record, you may need IP, you need match funding. And it's very competitive. So in the early stage, unless you can demonstrate your market and you've really done quite a lot of work, it might be very hard. But it depends on the space you're playing in and what sort of industry you're in. Later stage, it might get easier. At any given time, there are lots of grants available. Let's say over 600 grants available, but you may not be eligible for half of those. And it's a case of searching through how you can fit the criteria of those grants. So it may be that for example, there's a lot of money around at the moment for social enterprises. Well, your new gadget might not be a social enterprise, so that lets you out there. There may be money around for education. So if you've got an educational program for children, or even for adult literacy for adults, that might be something that will fit the bill. There may be awards as well that you can enter, and there are always annual awards that can give you both prestige, it can give you marketing, media exposure, and many of them can give you money as well. So there are always things you can look at, but don't rely on grants. And if you are relying on grants, it suggests that your business and your business strategy is a little bit flawed.
Yes.
Because if you don't get a grant, then what do you do?
Yep.
You know, you need to have a backup strategy.
Yeah.
You can apply for grants, and yes, that's great, and people like Innovic can certainly help you. But if you don't get a grant, what's your fallback? What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
You know, are you going to fall on your sword, or are you going to think, right, I go to the end user. I know who's going to buy my product. I will see if I can get into a joint venture with them. Mm-hmm. Or do you do a pre-sale? Mm-hmm. You know, with crowdfunding nowadays, you can pre-sell products. Okay. You can not only raise funding to develop the product, you can actually pre-sell it. Mm-hmm. So with your household device or your new type of clothes hanger or your new U-Butte app thing, you can pre-sell it. Okay. And that might be a way of generating the money to develop the process.
Okay, yeah, cool. Interesting and innovative ways of thinking it. In terms of the grant space, we actually did an interview a little while ago with Grant Ready, who
Adrian
at Grant Ready, and you know, for the viewers and the listeners, you know, grantready.com.au is a great website where you can actually access all of the different Australian grants that are available. Just in sort of wrapping this up, in terms of innovation, Innovic, and the services that you provide, maybe you could just give a little bit of an overview of, you know, the range of services that you actually do provide through your organisation.
Sure. Well, Innovic works very clearly in the innovation space. So we don't work with every business and we don't work with every small business. We work with businesses that have got some innovative idea. Mm-hmm. And it could be a product, service, process or technology. And across all sectors. So it could be digital, it could be a social enterprise, it could be environmental, sports and recreation, food, beverage, health, well-being, anything, any industry sector at all, but needs to have some innovative component of it. Mm-hmm. Could even be a program, for example. So our services, we do one-on-one commercialisation consultations where we will give you feedback on your idea, work out what your commercialisation pathway is and how we can help you get it. So we provide a complete hands-on service. What do you do tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to get your idea out there? And we can help you do it. So we do, as I said, it's hands-on. We find the designer for you, we get your product developed, we get it drawn up, we get it tested, we get it manufactured. We take it to market. We can get the packaging done, the launch, the branding, everything. Okay. So it's a from woe to go service. Okay. With licensing, we sit in on meetings, we do the negotiations. So as I say, it's a complete service if you're in the innovation space. Mm-hmm. And we work with a lot of other organisations. We've been in this space for nearly 30 years. We have lots of ties. We know corporates that are looking for new ideas and looking to license. And if you've been around for a while with an innovation idea, but you're flagging, I mean, you know, often happens, you've been in the marketplace, but, oh, there's competitors now, and now what do I do? Yeah. We can certainly get you back in again to look at, okay, how do we shake this up? Yeah. How do we apply innovation again to your business to take you up, to refresh, revitalise and take you up to the next level?
Fabulous. And if somebody's got an interest or an inquiry, how can they get in touch with you?
They can get us via our website, which is www.innovic.com.au, and Innovic is INNOVIC.com.au, or call us. We are a nationwide organisation now. We have clients from Darwin to Perth, and in between, all areas in between. We also put out a free newsletter every month that talks about grants and things of interest for innovators. Yeah. And people can call us on 0380603504.
Fabulous. And one of the other things that you do, are you still doing, I should ask, is the innovation cafes, because I actually attended one of those.
The opportunity cafes, yeah. Absolutely.
And from my experience, they were brilliant because it's a day where we can actually sit down in a room with other people and go through a lot of these processes and get an understanding of the processes and meet a number of people. So, you know, I'd suggest anybody who's, you know, really interested in commercialisation, have a look on the Innovic website to see where those things are being run, and get yourself into one of those. It'll give you a lot of good ideas about how to move your business forward.
Well, the opportunity cafes we run periodically. We're running one down in Frankston in November. Yeah. They're about creating the new businesses of the future.
Yes.
And what we tell all of our innovators and clients, you don't think about what you're doing today, you think about what will your business look like in the next 5 years.
Yes.
How do we collectively create the businesses of the future? And as you know, at the Opportunity Cafe, it's about coming up with ideas, seeing where the opportunities are, and collectively coming up with things that could create new business opportunities.
Yeah, most definitely. Joss Evans, thank you very much for spending some time with us with the interview today. We really appreciate your time.
Great, thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.